Stop crying and eat. These were the first words echoing through the dusty wooden barn as little Emily, barely 5 years old, sobbed into a cracked bowl of watery soup. Her tiny hands trembled as she forced another spoonful into her mouth. She had been hungry for hours, yet the food in front of her made her stomach twist with fear. But what hurt even more was the voice yelling at her. Her stepmother, Veronica. The bright red dress Veronica wore looked completely out of place in the cold barn. Her makeup was perfect, her hair flawless, yet her eyes burned with impatience. She pointed angrily at the terrified little girl on the floor. "Do you want your father to think you're ungrateful?" she hissed. "Eat it, all of it." Emily whimpered, I can't eat this anymore. Please, it hurts." Her stomach burned. She hadn't had a proper meal in days. Veronica often gave her leftovers, expired vegetables, or watered-down soup to teach her discipline. Meanwhile, Veronica herself ate the most delicious meals inside the warm mansion. Emily wiped her tears with the back of her muddy hand. Her dress was dirty, torn at the sleeves. Her hair was messy, as if she'd been crying for hours. The wooden barn where she sat had become her punishment spot. If Emily ever complained, this was where she ended up. "Stop pretending," Veronica snapped as she shoved a handful of carrots to the floor. "Food is food. You're lucky you get anything." Emily's small voice cracked as she whispered again, "I can't eat this anymore." Veronica's face twisted with rage. She leaned closer, her voice low and threatening. "You'll eat what I give you, or you'll stay here all night." The barn felt even colder at that moment. Emily sniffled, looking at the floor, wishing her real mother was still alive, wishing she had someone who could hug her, someone who could hear her tiny voice. But no one did, or so she thought, because at that exact moment, the barn door creaked open. Bright daylight spilled inside, and a tall figure stepped in. A man in a spotless white suit holding a black briefcase froze at the sight before him. It was Richard Kane, Emily's father, a millionaire businessman, a man everyone respected, feared, or admired. But right now, his face wasn't stern or calm. It was shocked, confused, then slowly, furious. "What is happening here?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the barn. Veronica turned swiftly, her expression instantly soft and fake. "Oh, Richard, honey, you weren't supposed to be home until tomorrow. I was just teaching Emily some manners." Richard didn't blink. He saw the fear in his daughter's eyes. He saw the dirty dress. He saw the untouched vegetables thrown on the ground. He saw the thinness in her arms, as if she had been missing real meals for weeks. Most of all, he heard the trembling whisper Emily had repeated earlier, "I can't eat this anymore." His heart stopped. He stepped forward, slowly, each step heavy with anger. "Veronica," he said through clenched teeth, "why is my daughter crying?" Veronica forced a smile. "She's being dramatic. Children exaggerate. She's just..." "Don't lie to Emmy," Richard thundered. The wind outside seemed to pause. Emily looked up at her father with trembling eyes. She didn't know whether to stay quiet or speak up. She had been punished before for talking too much, but Richard knelt down in front of her and gently touched her cheek. The moment he brushed away her tear, Emily burst into sobs and clutched his shirt. "Daddy, I'm hungry," she cried. "I don't want to eat this anymore. It tastes bad. My stomach hurts." Richard closed his eyes for a moment, as if holding back a storm. Then he stood up slowly, very slowly. His eyes locked onto Veronica. "You told me," he began, breathing hard, "that you were feeding her healthy food, giving her proper meals, treating her like your own." Veronica swallowed nervously, panic rising. "Well, I do. She just doesn't appreciate." "Enough." Richard's voice boomed through the barn. Emily flinched at the volume, and immediately Richard softened and knelt back to her. "It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy is here now. No one will yell at you again." Veronica's face twisted with fear. "Richard or honey, you're overreacting. I saw everything," Richard snapped. "I saw how she flinched when you raised your voice. I saw how thin she looks. I saw the way you treat her like a burden." Veronica's hands began shaking. "She's a child," Richard roared. "My child. And you starved her. You screamed at her. You locked her in a barn." Emily squeezed his hand tighter. Richard looked at his daughter, the only piece left of his late wife, and something inside him broke. How long had this been happening? How many days had Emily cried alone? How many meals had she eaten cold, old, or rotten? He picked her up gently, kissing her forehead. "From today," he whispered, "you will never go hungry again. You will never cry alone again." He covered her with his suit jacket. Then he turned toward Veronica, his eyes cold, unforgiving, deadly calm. "Veronica," he said, "your time in my house is over." The barn went silent, but this was only the beginning. Richard carried Emily out of the barn, holding her close as if afraid she might disappear. Her tiny arms wrapped around his neck, her tears soaking his shirt. Veronica followed behind them, her heels hitting the wooden floor in frantic clicks. "Richard, you can't just take her away from me like this," she cried. Richard didn't turn around. "She's my daughter," he said firmly, "and you lost your right to be in her life the moment you made her suffer. But you don't understand. I was stressed. I didn't mean." "You starved her," Richard snapped. "That is not stress. That is cruelty." Emily's grip tightened. Outside the barn, sunlight warmed her face, and she breathed a shaky breath as if feeling safety for the first time in a very long time. Richard motioned to the head housekeeper, Mrs. Irene, who had been waiting nearby. "Prepare a warm bath," Richard instructed. "Make her favorite food, and call Dr. Bennett immediately." Mrs. Irene nodded, tears in her eyes. She loved Emily like her own granddaughter. "Right away, sir." As they walked toward the mansion, Emily whispered softly, "Daddy, will you stay with me today?" Richard's throat tightened. He kissed her forehead. "I'm not leaving your side." Once inside, Emily was taken to the warm guest bathroom, where Mrs. Irene gently washed her, wiped her tears, and helped her into the softest pink pajamas. Richard stayed right outside the door, listening to every sound, making sure she felt safe. Meanwhile, Veronica stormed into the living room. "Richard, we need to talk." Richard finally faced her. "There's nothing to discuss. You can't throw me out because of one misunderstanding." Richard laughed bitterly. "One. Veronica, this barn has been used more than the dining table since I married you." Veronica's face froze. "You think I didn't notice?" Richard continued, Emily avoiding eye contact, losing weight, flinching whenever you entered the room, trembling at dinner. He stepped closer. "What did you do to my child?" Veronica stumbled back. She just needed discipline. She needed love. Richard roared. "And since you didn't give it, you will pack your things and leave tonight." "No, Richard, please. I'll change, I promise." Richard shook his head. "You had every chance, and instead, you broke her." At that moment, Emily walked into the hallway, wrapped in a towel, holding Mrs. Irene's hand. Her face was calmer, but her eyes were still red. Veronica kneeled dramatically. "Emily, sweetheart, tell your daddy we can work this out." Emily quietly hid behind Richard's leg. That one small action was enough. Richard stepped in front of her protectively. "You see," he said coldly, "even she doesn't feel safe with you." Veronica's face drained of color. Richard pointed to the door. "Leave. No. Now." Veronica, shaking in disbelief, grabbed her purse and ran out, slamming the door behind her. The house felt quieter, safer, warmer. Emily tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, is she gone?" Richard knelt, lifting her gently into his arms. "Yes," he whispered. "She will never hurt you again." Emily rested her head on his shoulder. "Are you mad at me?" she asked softly. Richard felt his heart shatter. "No, sweetheart. I'm furious at myself for not seeing it sooner." He hugged her tightly. "But I promise you something. From today, you will live like the princess you are." Mrs. Irene smiled warmly in the background. Later that evening, Emily sat at the large dining table. Not in the barn, not on the floor, not with spoiled vegetables. In front of her was a plate of warm homemade pasta, garlic bread, and fresh soup that smelled delicious, real food. Emily took a bite and her eyes widened. "It's yummy," she said with a small smile. Richard placed his hand on her back. "As long as I'm alive, you will always eat delicious food." Emily giggled and continued eating. After dinner, they sat on the couch, watching her favorite cartoon. Emily rested against Richard's chest, feeling truly safe for the first time in months. As she drifted to sleep, she whispered, "Daddy, thank you for saving me." Richard kissed her forehead gently. "I didn't save you," he whispered. "You saved Emmy by telling the truth." He looked toward the empty doorway, where Veronica once stood, and silently vowed never to let anyone hurt his daughter again. Because Emily wasn't just his child, she was his whole world, and he would fight anyone, to protect her.